Hello, everyone, and welcome to this average Good Friday edition of Trad Tasman Talk. This is the first episode that we've scheduled here on Trad Tasman Talk on YouTube. We are on the Unshackled YouTube channel, and it's just come through on my feed here, so it all worked. We're able to schedule episodes weekly now.
Yes, it did come through for me as well. Sorry, everyone, I'm sort of scrambling around trying to make everything work. It seems to have gone very well. So it is 8 p.m. here in Auckland, and welcome to everyone who is been waiting for the show, and we will get things going.
And it is 6 p.m. here in Melbourne. I've been, as our great government overlords have told us, I've been here at home all day. So I have not, for the authorities that are listening, I have not left this house. So I obeyed your instructions to stay at home.
Oh, now you make me look bad.
Oh, why? Where did you go?
I did leave the house. Yes, I went for a walk today.
Walk as is that? Did you?
I went for my state approved walk today. So I went to the local.
Were you walking
local park.
briskly enough for it to be classified as exercise? Because if you're going, because police are asked to use discretion when applying the containment measures and restrictions. What if they deemed you to be your walk was not brisk enough to be exercise?
I was carrying a baby, so I think that counts as like weightlifting while locomoting or something along those lines. I'm sure would have gotten away with that. But there were no police around because they were all busy blocking the motorways to make sure nobody escaped to go to their batch or holiday home or family destination. So it was no police around. Didn't see anything. Just the helicopter, if you can hear it in the background, police helicopter flying overhead. But that's just normal. That's just normal. Nothing special about that.
Yeah, I heard it when we were in the interlude there. You also live just outside of Auckland Airport. Have you heard any planes coming in?
Yeah, we've still got planes coming in, at least one this morning that I noticed, but not very many of them. New Zealand has now initiated full quarantine of new arrivals, so everyone who comes to the airport gets possibly even a military escort to the wherever internment camps they will be placed for the next 2 weeks.
And just to let everyone know, since we are on the Unshackled's YouTube channel, which is monetized, you can send a super chat directly through the live chat by pressing the $sign, choose your amount in Australian, New Zealand, or whatever currency of your choice. I should say fiat currency of your choice. And type in your message, and we'll read it out for you. And make sure you put your gender there as well, because we did misgender one of Clarky a couple of weeks back.
You'll have to apologize to every single show now. You should also start accepting silver and gold bullion as well, just in case.
When I interviewed Martin North, who's an Australian economist, I was interviewing him about the cash ban, and I asked him about gold. And yes, the Australian government, like over in the US, does have the power to confiscate your gold.
That's unfortunate. Just Bitcoin. That's it. You've got no other options.
Yep.
Very good. Well, it is Good Friday, and welcome again to everyone in the chat. I see everyone is chatting away already. I'm gonna try and keep on top of the comments again. Super chat will get you get your question asked or comment read out, and it is of course Good Friday today, so that's the sort of I'd say events surrounding Good Friday are probably a good way to open up the show with anyway. So we had the like I said, the roadblocks already. The interesting thing that happened here in New Zealand, which as a Puritan was personally offensive, we usually have Easter trading laws where the shops have to close on the Friday and on the Sunday. And it's the one Sunday a year that the shops have to be closed on. And then our temporary dictator decided it was too much to close the shops for 2 days because people couldn't go for 2 days without shopping. It might overwhelm instead of the bread lines being 100 to 300 meters long, they might have ended up 200 to 600 meters long. So they picked one of the days to open the shops on, and they decided to open it on the Sunday instead and leave the Friday today, leave the shops closed because apparently Friday it was more valuable to the Roman Catholics and Anglicans. And so I did point out to some friends that I did find that personally offensive, in that to the for the Puritans, the Reformed, the Presbyterians, the Sunday, the Lord's Day, the Christian Sabbath is always more important. And it was this year will be the first year probably in New Zealand's history actually with not even a single Sabbath day without trading. So that is another historic first happening here.
You're a man of faith, did you get to have a virtual service?
No, actually, I talked about being a Puritan before, but we don't celebrate Easter specifically. We do not elevate one Lord's Day above another, and so each Sunday is a commemoration of the resurrection, as it is. So we don't do Easter or Christmas or anything like that. So I'm one of the few remaining Puritans around, probably, but that does mean no special services to worry about.
In Victoria, we used to have the stores were shut both Good Friday and Easter Sunday when we had a Liberal government from state government from 2010 to 2014. Mm-hmm. They changed it so you could be open on Easter Sunday. So all the supermarkets and retail outlets, they're all still closed on Good Friday, including this Good Friday. There was uncertainty about whether they would still be closed this Good Friday or whether they'd trade, but they are closed today, but they will be open Easter Saturday, Sunday and Monday. And everyone knows that I'm an atheist, so Good Friday is pretty much a day where, well, it hasn't changed for me because everything's shut normally on a Good Friday.
You can't go out anyway.
Yeah, so I'm normally just around the house on Good Friday every year. So it hasn't been much more of an extraordinary day to me.
Well, I suppose the commenters, I see some of the commenters did have a slightly different day. Obviously, people who perhaps would have had church services and so on would have had, and I did see some posts about people having virtual services and so on. But again, that's that's.
And please don't incriminate yourself in the comments by saying that you left the house.
Unless it was for an essential reason, such as walking the dog. But make sure you have a dog if you go out to walk the dog. That's just a little bit of legal advice from me.
So you mentioned that the New Zealand police have checkpoints all around. Obviously, in Australia, each state has its own police force, and laws are enforced by the state government. That's why even though the Prime Minister announces the restrictions, it's up to the state and territory governments to enforce them. Because a lot of people get away during the Easter holidays here because it's a 4-day weekend, the weather's not too bad, but message has been stay at home, because even though we have flattened the curve here, not just flattened it, I should say, it's now dipping the curve. Mm-hmm. We had less than 100 daily infections yesterday. We are up to now. If I just bring up the up to date.
Yeah, it's a good time to go into the figures as well. And we had the same thing here in New Zealand, where the whole flatten the curve thing apparently has happened now, and we have decreasing cases. The number of active cases in New Zealand is going down. The number of active cases in Australia are down, and we'll compare exact numbers in a minute. And so there's a lot of talk about this squashing, reducing the curve, bringing the case totals down to New Zealand, and the elimination or eradication of COVID-19 or the commie flu has been, that's sort of the target, and that's what people are talking about. And whether that's feasible, it will remain to be seen, of course. But that basically is the target both of our nations are on. And yet New Zealand is in total lockdown, where the economy is tanking it. We're bleeding out, I think, $500 million every single day. Just about every single business in New Zealand is running on life support. At least as far as I remember from last week, Australia, a lot of businesses were still able to operate.
We've still got Macca's, KFC open.
The most important businesses.
Oh, hey, you can't. Nobody knows what the 11 secret herbs and spices are, so you can't make it at home.
Yeah. Well, too bad. New Zealand again. Yeah, New Zealand is without everything, and yet people have been talking about Jacinda's response being the best ever, and it's wonderful, world class, blah blah blah. On it goes, and you look at the numbers per capita, and there's nothing special about New Zealand. We're doing worse than Australia per capita in terms of infections, and we'll get onto that now.
Per million population, I noticed that New Zealand is at 266 cases per million people. Australia is at 241. Yes, New Zealand, only 2 people have died. Their deaths per million population is obviously lower. I'm sure because a lot of the deaths in Australia, the biggest cluster of deaths, I should say, is related to that disastrous decision by New South Wales Health and Port to allow that Ruby Princess cruise ship to dock.
Yep, and we had a similar situation here as well, where I'm not sure if it was the Ruby Princess or another. It was one of the Princess ships that docked in New Zealand as well, and we have again many of our cases, probably not most, but a big cluster related to that cruise ship as well. Yeah. So. The new cases today. I'll just go over New Zealand. So you had just about 100. We had 44 new cases today. But compare that to population size. We're at 5 million people, and you're at however many million.
26 million.
26 million, exactly. And so per capita, for us, that's a huge number of cases compared to you. And yet we are now supposedly more than 2 weeks into our total lockdown. So we've now had the entire country, economy, everything shut down for 2 weeks, and yet we're still getting more cases per capita than Australia. And Australia has been testing almost more than any country anyway. I think Australia has been very good on top of its testing, so I've heard.
If I just bring up and I'm unable to still at this home setup do good screen sharing like I normally do, but so I'll just read out the current information.
Yeah. Just checked that it was the Ruby Princess that docked in New Zealand as well, and a lot of our cases come from that ship too.
And there has been a criminal investigation has been launched by New South Wales Police to see how that ship was able to dock, and I know that there's a lawsuit in the works from the passengers as well against the cruise company, and you can be pretty certain that it's these Princess cruise ships. They're owned by Carnival Cruises. We all know that the cruise ship industry will. I'd say it's even in a more precarious position than the airlines.
Yes, I would hope so, but you never know. You can try and make these predictions to say, oh yeah, cruising is dead, and then for we had we're rescuing. Actually, both of our countries are rescuing citizens in, is it sort of Peru or Argentina? Well,
Yeah, that's where
I'm not
one of
sure
the
which side.
cruise
Yeah,
ships is stuck.
exactly. And it left New Zealand and has Australians on board. It left New Zealand on March 15th. So this is in the middle of the lockdown, in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic and scare. Um, People were still getting on cruise ships. So don't speak of the cruise ship industry demise too early, um, because if people are getting on cruise ships in the middle of a pandemic, somehow I think that perhaps they will continue.
So we've got
I just went out
50.
Chile. It was Chile as the country.
Yeah.
I read. I came up with just about every single South American country except for Chile. That's the one. I should have remembered that.
So our current total cases is, as of this is 6 a.m. on April 10th, which is today, Good Friday, 6,152 cases and 52 deaths. So we have had more deaths in recent days, which was expected. But in terms of those admitted to hospital and in ICU, it's extremely low. And we've had almost half of our coronavirus cases recover now, and we've conducted, as at last count, 334,000 tests for a positive rate of 1.8%.
Yeah, and that testing rate, I believe, is much higher than New Zealand's. I haven't got the exact number of tests that we've done, but we're doing about 4,000 a day at the moment, and we were doing about 1,000 a week ago. We were only doing about 1,000 a day. So our testing rate can't be that high. Our highest clusters are, yeah, again, all have to do with overseas travel. The reason New Zealand's deaths are so low is because the average age of the infected is very, very young, because there's a lot of overseas travel with regards to young people, and very little effect on old people's homes. And there was I believe, one old people's home with a number of cases. I'm not sure if the second death is related to that, but both of the deaths were in their 80s, or one in their 90s, I believe, and another in her 80s. So there's let's see, ICU. We have 4 in the ICU at the moment, 2 in critical condition of those, and in total only 16 in hospital in total. And a lot of hospitals are practically empty at the moment. Everything is just locked on standby. I've heard cases of GPs being sent home. People on holiday, nurses, doctors on holiday, basically said, "Go home. There's nothing for you to do." That's the situation we're in. It's just a crazy world.
And I know that our state of Victoria is pretty much that same situation with the hospitals. They're preparing for the worst case scenario, because the state government is really worried about the annual flu season, because winter is coming. It's still relatively warm at the moment. I just had the aircon on before we started.
Oh, we had a beautiful day here today. I was outside all day working in the garden, and clearly getting a little bit colder, but it's not that. Yeah, I mean, it's, comments as I can hear, people going broke, GPs being laid off, they can't earn any money, nobody will turn up, and just absolutely bizarre. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and GPs are going broke, and people are being laid off in the medical industry.
Well, we've still got continuing the Tasman totalitarian trophy, but it's
Yes.
definitely, I think,
You can't compete. You can't compete with us. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
but it's a
We got to
state
win
by
that.
state contest now,
Oh well,
because
okay. Go for it.
especially New South Wales and Victoria police, they've really ramped up their enforcement of the restrictions. So unless you have a reasonable excuse to be outside of the home, you'll get a fine of in between 1,000 and 1,600. So only 4 reasons for any resident to go out: food and supplies, medical purposes, exercise, and work or education. You cannot go for a drive unless there's an essential purpose. You can't go fishing or boating. You can go to the beach as long as it's for exercise. You can legally go and visit your holiday home, but is it not advised? Our police minister, Lisa Neville, said, create your own traditions at home at your primary residence. Don't go out and travel to regional and coastal communities this weekend. For those who plan to go to their holiday home, they must only go with the same people from their primary residence. Can I go to a shopping centre and buy a bed? People should ask themselves, do I really need to go out and buy a bed? If the answer is no, then don't do it.
You've got a perfectly good floor to sleep on, guys. You don't need a bed.
You can't go to you can't rent a holiday house, Airbnb, or go camping. Public transport is still going, but you can only use it unless it's
only essential reasons. Yeah,
but I love how, because there was a shopping centre in New South
just make your own
Wales,
traditions, Tim.
a Westfield, because the shopping centres are still open because they contain what are classified as essential businesses, and there was a police blitz at Westfield Miranda, which it's actually near the Shire, Cronulla, where Scott Morrison's electorate is, asking people at the Westfield, what's your business for being there? And you still have what would be considered luxury retailers, such as white goods stores and that open. And you even have car washes open, a lot of, well, you would say not immediate, like they're sort of things that you don't need immediately.
It's what's deemed essential. We talked about this last week. Is crazy. It's sort of a top-down decision. All people who are working hard to deem themselves essential, and the people who have decided that they're non-essential, they're gone. I just got an email this evening from Gun City, who can take online orders for like 10 items that they have in store, like fancy jackets and gumboots, because those are essential. So you can reopen your store to sell gumboots if you're keen.
But it's because the police are allowed to use discretion.
Discretion,
which means that they basically can judge on the spot whether they believe you're doing an essential activity or not. And so obviously we know that there are a lot of good cops, but there's also a lot of cops who love the power trip, a lot of cops who want to be seen like they're doing something.
And it's a huge amount of power to the police. And actually, I don't know if you have the same case in Australia, but in New Zealand, the actual enforcement, the pandemic acts give them only the power to stop people who they suspect, they have to have reasonable belief that you are infected or are spreading an infection, which they can't really do in this case. So lawyers have basically said the police stopping you wouldn't hold up under a legal challenge, but there's no time, like the courts are closed and you can't put forward a legal challenge. But essentially the police don't actually have the powers to do what they're doing. It's just that the government's told them to do it and the courts wouldn't stop them. So I wonder if you're in a similar situation in Australia, where there's actually no proper legal basis for such a heavy-handed lockdown.
No, that hasn't been talked about at all. It's any resident. It doesn't matter. The police, if they suspect that you're out for non-essential activity, then they can approach you. They don't have to suspect that you've got.
Well, that's basically what's happening in New Zealand. That's what's happened in New Zealand as well. But legally speaking, according to the law that they're supposed to be bound by, that's not actually power they have. It's just power that's been taken, and there's no actual legal basis or legal justification for them being able to pull people over. But that's not actually going to, that's never going to be challenged. But it is an interesting legal case where, the powers are allowed to be whatever they need to be or deemed to need to be. And no, there won't be a class action or whatever. The courts won't take anything. So there's no point.
And how's your health minister going over in New Zealand? Because what was that last week? He was, going for a hike or something?
No, mountain biking.
Mountain biking, yes.
Mountain biking, yeah. And lots of people still going mountain biking, but not a good idea if you're the health minister and your government has just told everyone not to go mountain biking because it's dangerous. They've since banned hunting, fishing, swimming, paddle boarding, boating, just about anything. But I think one of the few things you could basically get away with still is cycling. Like cycling's still okay, and it's where the borderline is. So what he was doing was not necessarily something that would get you in trouble with the police, but it was something the government and the police had told people not to do. And that's what he got in trouble with. Mountain biking. He drove to the local mountain bike park and went mountain biking. And somebody snapped a picture of him because he was in his car with his face plastered all over it. And then the couple of days later, which now is this week's update, is that the Minister of Health, David Clark, drove to the beach. He drove 20 kilometers to the beach during the lockdown. And he offered his resignation to the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who didn't accept his resignation. And he got a demotion. So he lost all his other portfolios except for health. So he's still the Minister for Health.
Portfolios?
I see if I've got a quick list here. It just says, so he was the Associate Finance Minister.
Oh, that's a nothing position.
But he apparently, what's even worse than being the Associate Finance Minister is being the Minister of Health, because he still has that portfolio. And so that clearly must be, since it must be the least important portfolio you could possibly have, would be the health portfolio right now. Well, because you're in the middle of a pandemic, right? The least important thing you could possibly have is a Minister for Health.
Well, it's in the state of New South Wales where their ministers have been either busted for incompetence or just plain hypocrisy, because this all stems back to the New South Wales bushfire season, where the police minister David Elliott, he went holidaying in Europe while there was a state of emergency. He's also actually police minister, emergency services minister, and he only came back when there was a fire truck that tipped over and killed 3 firefighters. So then he came back. He didn't resign, nor did the Premier Gladys Berejiklian make him resign. And recently he was caught firing an illegal firearm, but he's not going to be prosecuted for it.
Yes.
And then the health minister of New South Wales, Brad Hazzard, he's the one who cleared the Ruby Princess to dock at Circular Quay. Now there's also scrutiny on the Transport Minister, Andrew Constance, because he's responsible for ports as well, about his role. And Andrew Constance, he's been a bit untouchable because he was the hero of the bushfires. His state electorate of Bega was one of the most badly affected, and of course the media fell in love with him when he bagged Scott Morrison on air for his handshake visit to the affected regions. And now this week, being busted has been the New South Wales Arts Minister, Don Harwan. He had been relocated himself to his holiday home on the New South Wales Central Coast, because apparently his city-based apartment, there was not enough space for him to get fresh air and that. And he also came back to Sydney twice to go clothes shopping. So he's been ordered back now by Gladys Berejiklian and the New South Wales Police. They fined him $1,000 for breaching the restrictions, even though he actually might not have technically breached them, because most of this non-essential travel was before it was made completely illegal. So it's more of a virtue signaling fine by the police to say, look, the rules apply to all. It doesn't mean whether you're the arts minister. So you have 4 ministers in the New South Wales government still have their jobs under a cloud because of their conduct. Gladys Berejiklian hasn't sacked any of them because New South Wales state government, the Liberal Party, is very factionalised, and Gladys Berejiklian got the job as Premier through a factional deal. And Don Harwan, the arts minister, he's a significant power broker and ally of hers, and that could also be a reason why she hasn't taken any action. And even though we have a Liberal government in New South Wales and a Liberal government in Canberra, they seem to have the most dysfunctional federal-state relationship of all, because they're trying to deflect blame on Border Force for allowing the Ruby Princess to dock, even though, and this is a flaw that's been exposed in Border Force, they don't have a biosecurity division. And this was during the bushfires. The most dysfunctional state and federal relation was New South Wales and the Fed. So I think that's a great irony, the fact that they're from the same party, and they're at each other's throats during both national emergencies.
Yeah, it's a total clown show in many cases here in New Zealand as well. You've got the government doing everything usually as inefficiently as it possibly can. I haven't been listening to Jacinda's press conferences personally, but I've been reading sort of some transcriptions and commentary on them, and even the news articles. It's clear the decisions made are based on either her personal feelings or whatever her friends tell her to do or ask her to do, or the deflection to the experts. The issue with the rule by experts that we have is that if you ask the health experts to say, how do you stop a pandemic, right, they're going to say, well, just shut the entire country down and seal everyone into their homes. Shut it down. It down. And that's it. And then but then the people are, okay, cool. We're listening to the health experts. It's like, well, that's not necessarily the best. That's not necessarily the best strategy, and you're not looking at the effects that you're having outside of health, or even further into the health system, because you're just focusing on the pandemic. So you're delaying people's cancer surgeries. These people could die. You're delaying other surgeries, possibly causing permanent damage to people. You've got all kinds of weird knock-on effects where, especially due to people's businesses being closed, there are so many people that could die of various other reasons, and the long-lasting damage could be beyond anything that a total lockdown has caused, especially when, as I said at the beginning of the show, we are in total lockdown, and yet we're still tracking per capita worse than Australia is, than you guys are. So they just it's a deflection to the so-called experts who don't have a proper holistic view of the country, because they're being asked, what do we do to fix this one specific thing? The public service doesn't have to worry because they're still on full pay. Nobody's getting fired. The MPs,
well,
the MPs and bureaucrats and consultants.
Taking a pay cut.
They're not even taking a pay cut. They're 100% pay all the time. People who can't work now are probably on 80% pay, most of them, or they just lost their jobs. There's a few people who can keep working. Like, what do I care? But I do care about everyone else, actually. So people who are unaffected, and even people who are unaffected by their pay at the moment, they could be affected down the line, right? If this huge economic disruption, that's going to affect everyone, and the strategy, is it achievable? Who knows at this point, right? No, this is unprecedented. Not that a pandemic is unprecedented. This one is fairly mild compared to just pestilences and plagues and various other diseases that we've had through the ages. But what is unprecedented is the response to it, where the question now is, well, hey, is this worth it? Have we actually saved any lives? Is somebody going to be able to run those numbers at the end and figure out, what the total damage is of what we're doing? So that's why I think there's a lot of the conspiracies around this, where people are wondering if this is intentional and whether there's some other grand plan and some intentional restructuring of the economy. There's been talk of a UBI by some New Zealand politicians. Or maybe not the politicians themselves, but the lobbyists, and things have gone quiet on that. But I know that behind the scenes, there's still a lot of talk about trying to implement some kind of UBI, universal basic income, let's see, we've got the the whole sort of 5G story. I don't know if you have, if people are burning 5G cell towers in Australia, but that's it. Yeah. You have the weird 5G people who are always there, and then the media has kind of blown this up to 5G is causing coronavirus. It's not true. And tell everyone 5G is causing coronavirus. It's not true.
It's
and then
5G
spreading
bats,
the theory.
Are causing it. and it's all being orchestrated by the Israelis who already had the vaccine all prepared.
And so on, like on it goes. And anyway, they push these, out so that more people will believe them, and generate more interesting interesting results for them. And we actually I had someone get in touch with me saying that they've got some footage that I'll hopefully get out later if I can get it from them, of a 5G protest that was attempted to be held today. And apparently the area where this protest was supposed to be held was swarmed by police before anyone ever got there. There were like apparently dozens of police officers there waiting for them. My friend managed to get an interview with one of the 5G guys, who he said was the most crazy thing he'd ever heard in his life, but he thought it was interesting and worth it. And the police threatened him with arrest for basically trying to get the story and being there and filming them just, wrecking this 5G protest. And so that goes on, like on and on and on. And that seems to be everybody sitting at home and is bored, and that's where this is going now.
Before I add my thoughts, I've just been alerted to some breaking news by Brucey Boy in the live chat there, and I've double checked it myself that Don Harwen has resigned from cabinet. He said, "I will not allow my circumstances to be a distraction from that work, and I very much regret my residential arrangement to become an issue during this time." So there we go.
That's good. That's good. That's actually good. We have not had a single resignation or fire. Let's go deep. I'm trying to think. One cabinet minister, Jacinda, fired, or maybe they've resigned. I'm not sure what the say was, but yeah, we've had no mistakes are really bad enough for somebody to leave the Labour Party cabinet in New Zealand. So it's good to see. I like it when politicians have to resign.
I think in Australia we've got a firm separation from the health experts that are employed by government. The chief medical officer, Brendan Murphy, he's only there to advise the government, who rightfully make the decisions about the coronavirus containment measures, both at the federal level and through the national cabinet with the state and territory leaders. And his role is to basically educate people about how the coronavirus is spread, how we are going in terms of knowing more about it, how to contain it in our daily lives. He hasn't become political. Even though he appears there at a press conference with the Prime Minister after every National Cabinet meeting, he doesn't answer political... He doesn't... Of course, he backs up the restrictions that the government's announced, because he is the expert there, but he's purely there in a health expertise capacity. So there's that good separation there. We obviously there's every person with a medical degree who wants to get on TV has a different opinion.
Different opinion, yeah, exactly. But it's very little of that in New Zealand, and very little of that kind of balance where the only politician who is sort of in the cabinet who has voiced any concerns that a pure health approach, essentially, where the pure purpose is to squash, to eliminate this virus at any cost. It was actually Winston Peters who said, "Oh well, we have to balance out some economic needs," and he said this in an interview, not necessarily as part of the cabinet press conferences. And that's something that's been sorely lacking in New Zealand. A few journalists, a couple of experts who have spoken out against this, but no real traction anywhere. And I think in Australia you've got a little bit more discussion, a little bit more more people or more prominent organizations that have actually sort of provided some kind of pushback, even like opposing the lockdown outright.
Yes, the Institute of Public Affairs, which is a free market think tank based in Melbourne, one of their policy directors, Gideon Rosner, he's prominent on on Sky News. He's been around in the political scene for close to a decade. He and the IPO released a video saying, "End this national lockdown. Now look at the businesses that have been destroyed. All those people out of work, and we need an exit strategy." And of course, he was pilloried on Twitter because, well, they never liked the Institute of Public Affairs.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, it's one of the another strand of the derangement syndromes, IPA derangement syndrome.
Yeah, and regardless of if the lockdown is good or bad, it would be much nicer to have more diverse views and more. If everybody's thinking the same thing, then nobody's going to spot the obvious mistakes. And if there are more prominent people pushing for different things, different actions, saying, no, actually, we do something different, and that getting more coverage, people talking about it, is actually good overall for people to assess whether what's happening is good. Is the lockdown good or bad? And in New Zealand, there's basically none of that. Just about nothing.
Of course, communists love that the economy is shut down and these private businesses are suffering. And
everybody being out of the job just like them is great, isn't it?
I've said this before, but it's worth saying again, that the left seem to believe that they've done a very good job in abstracting the term economy to make it just apply to the rich capitalists, when
exactly.
An economy is, when we talk about a strong economy, we're talking about standard of living, quality of life, because workers, whether they're minimum wage or
people are the economy.
Yeah,
right. The economy is made up of the people. That's it.
And obviously they're suffering as well. We've still got the queues outside of Centrelink, and there's the new unemployed term now, that businesses that have been forced to shut because they're non-essential, their workforce hasn't been sacked, they've been stood down. And so because they're in employment limbo, the federal parliament sat this week to pass what's called the job Keeper Allowance, so that you have a payment while you're stood down. There's the job seeker, which is for those who have become unemployed there. But a lot of those people are in those Centrelink lines through no fault of their own, and that's a huge indignity for them to be in that line, having to. Well, Centrelink has been an incredibly bureaucratic organisation for years, and a lot of those people experiencing it for the first time, it'd be horrific. They are part of the economy as well. They're suffering because the economy is suffering as well. And I'm finding now that because there are, given that we are flattening the curve in Australia, people are now more feeling more, I would say, legitimate in asking the question, when can we start relaxing these restrictions? And of course, the authorities don't want to give up their new power, but the justification is that we can't let our guard down now because we might get another spike. There might be a second wave. It seems that there's always an excuse as why
there always will be. Yeah. Yeah, and it's the thing. I talks about a vaccine as well. There's no vaccine. We don't have any vaccines for viruses, or very few, essentially. They would take years to develop and so on. It doesn't work. It doesn't just turn up. That's not how this has ever worked, and it's not suddenly going to change now. And there will always be more excuses that there's a little pocket left. You can't get rid of the virus. Perhaps if it's gone, well then things will get interesting, I suppose. You're talking about the job keeper situation. In New Zealand, we had this, and we talked about it last week, the basically wage subsidy is what it's called. So basically, if your government has forced the business to be closed, then they will pay 80% of the wages, except, of course, that's the taxpayers, the remaining taxpayers, or since it's all being borrowed, it's really the future generations that are paying for the shutdown now. And they will cover 80% of people's wages up to a certain amount. And I'm not sure, it's actually not a huge amount. So especially people who are on higher wages will actually be impacted worse. So people, like we were talking about the GPs earlier, shutting down their businesses. Basically, if you're a GP and you got to shut down your business and go on 80% pay up to I don't know 40 or 50,000, well, that's peanuts compared to what you were earning before. And so that's quite a very weird situation to be in, especially during an intentional shutdown of basically the entire country. So I think we're getting to the point, unless you want to add some more stuff about the coronavirus, we could probably go on to our one other topic that we have to suggest to talk about this week.
Yes, there was a major non-coronavirus story development in Australia. Catholic Cardinal George Pell, who was the third highest ranking official in the Vatican. He was the treasurer there. The High Court of Australia, in a 7-0 decision, quashed his conviction on historical child sexual charges, which he'd been found guilty by a second jury trial in the County Court in Victoria in December 2018, had been upheld by the Victorian Court of Appeal. It's based on the sole testimony of a surviving complainant of the supposed crime in St. Patrick's Cathedral. So it was basically a he said, and there were other opportunity witnesses who said, look, he couldn't have been in two places at once. It happened on a Sunday Mass. He would have been out the front greeting parishioners when this crime was supposed to have happened here. So the High Court, this is the same High Court, we should remember, that said that Aboriginal people, they can't be considered aliens even if they're non-citizens. That was a 4-3 decision, and most people could interpret that as like a lefty decision.
Yeah, so a partisan decision.
But in this case, it was 7-0, which is pretty emphatic, and it's really turned the scrutiny
That's unanimous. That's unanimous
on the Victorian legal system and Victoria Police, because I'm sure you'll be aware, and some of your audience might be, that Sky News commentator Andrew Bolt he didn't call himself a defender of Pell, but a defender of justice and fairness and evidence.
And that's the case in this. I could say as well. Like I don't, I'm not a particular fan of the Roman Catholic Church or any cardinals. You don't have a dog in this fight either yourself. And I've seen that, but there are plenty of people who traditionally are opposed to the Roman Catholic Church, people who are atheists or Protestants and so on, who basically have seen this as a massive miscarriage of justice, something that should never have happened. Simply looking at the evidence to say, this is bad for everybody. This is simply not true. These accusations do not hold up in court, and he should never have been convicted based on this. And that is that's really what's happening. That's really what this decision here, I think, is all about. And yet there is one section of society that seems to be incredibly upset.
Yeah, Twitter, they told us to respect the legal process when they got the decisions that they liked about Pell's conviction, but apparently their faith in the legal process has been shattered because the High Court overturned it, and in their minds he's still guilty.
Still guilty, that's right.
And I know that Clementine Ford, our most infamous feminist, has still been ranting on Twitter, calling him a pedophile and calling Andrew Bolt, Miranda Devine, and a few other conservatives pedophile defenders. And
I wonder if there's any kind of defamation issues that will come up now.
Well, because he's been found by Australia's highest court to be exonerated of that accusation.
Exactly. So anyway, I suppose you'll end up seeing what happens. But it's quite bizarre to see that these people who have held on to this, basically it's the hashtag Me Too campaign, where they wanted to be able to take down anybody without evidence. And now they've suddenly been told, hey, actually, you need evidence to take somebody down. then now suddenly it's a total meltdown.
Premier Daniel Andrews, he said, I have no comment, but to victims of sexual abuse, I hear you, I see you, I believe you, which basically I interpret as it's he had no regrets about, well, it's his government agencies, Victoria Police and the Director of Public Prosecutions, that have created this ordeal, because Victoria Police, it's Andrew Bold, he's now gone after them now that the all legal proceedings are over. They advertised for people to complain if they'd been abused by George Pell, and they tried to make 26 charges stick to him, and of course none of them have stuck there. And
that's a big zero.
And that's for a police force to sort of go to that length. It's certainly the fact that they've targeted someone so specifically and so ferociously, it sort of it obviously
and it's not really the first time that any police force anywhere has done this, where basically the order was given to take somebody down and make it happen, and sometimes they get away with it and sometimes they don't, and in this case pretty clearly that they didn't, and that's I think on the whole everyone, at least any reasonable person, is happy with this outcome, because it was clear as day.
And I've just been alerted into the chat. They've reminded me that our ABC, they were the main media organisation that were pushing the, what you'd say, demonisation of Pell. They, about 5 years ago, aired allegations that he touched some boys at a swimming pool. That case never made it to court, and during the High Court appeal process, one of their senior journalists at the ABC, Sarah Ferguson, her Revelation documentary series was airing about the Roman Catholic Church sexual abuse scandal and cover-up, and the third episode was about new Pell accusers, and they've pulled that episode after the High Court decision there.
Oof. Yeah. And I mean, they're taxpayer funded, right? We'll see if there's any repercussions for them. But hopefully the defund ABC movement gets a little bit more traction after this.
Oh, the ABC, it's been an important public information service during the pandemic.
Yes.
Anthony
Essential
Albanese,
service.
one of his questions to Scott Morrison this week is, will you restore funding, which means restore the ABC's funding increases to the organisation during this time?
I hope the answer was just no, just full stop. That's it. Obviously they're worried about their money, and we talked last week about all the journalists losing their jobs. Haven't had any new developments in that area since then.
The sports journalists, they've been losing their jobs.
They're gone.
Fox
we're talking about
announced some more layoffs here. The NRL, they hope to come back. Well, they said they're going to come back May 28th. Everyone is pretty much saying that they're probably dreaming. The AFL is being much more cautious. They haven't announced anything yet, but the NRL has been severely mismanaged, has got a bloated bureaucracy. Todd Greenberg, the CEO, he's under intense pressure, and their broadcast partner, the Nine Network, really lambasted him, saying that you've squandered the TV rights money that we paid you to pay for this bloated bureaucracy. We want a discount now, and you didn't even consult us about the season relaunch.
All right. I think we can sort of start wrapping the show up a little bit early on everybody's Good Friday. I think if we go back to sort of coronavirus for just 1 minute, it does look like we are on track, or there is at least the possibility of that's being floated of an Anzac Day reopening, or essentially, having coronavirus eradicated by Anzac Day, and that's sort of the possibility with the current trajectories. And so we're talking before about whether or not what more excuses would be brought up and so on, or whether clusters would survive. That will all remain to be seen. But the
Anzac
the inherent
Day,
advantages.
it's already been cancelled in Australia. That
It has
decision
so
was
far, but yeah.
made early, and there's certainly been no talk in Australia, no lobbying for.
Yeah.
We're still going to have a virtual Anzac Day from the
Yeah,
War
yeah,
Memorial.
whether mass gatherings will be back by then, I suppose, will remain to be seen. But it's at the rate that things are currently going, it's entirely possible that we'll be down to basically zero cases. Like, that's the optimistic scenario that the elimination strategy is dealing with. Say, hey, look, by the time within a month, basically, we should be seeing zero cases. If that fails, everything will have been for nothing as well, which is, could be incredibly painful.
I still think for the next 6 months we should keep our nations grounded because that has been the overwhelming source of infections, people coming overseas, but reopen our cities.
Yeah, definitely. The countries should be able to reopen, and even if the Tasman nations are both essentially reach an elimination status, we could reopen, sort of travel trade between Australia and New Zealand. Some of the Pacific Islands have no issues as well. So we could start to see, a little bit of cooperation there, because we're in a unique position where we're all surrounded by giant oceans. As long as the international flights stay away, then we potentially can be in good shape. And that's sort of the only good news on this that we can end the show with. And that's the long shot, and that's what their goal is. Basically at this point, I mean, I do hope that they succeed, because if they don't, then everything's for nothing, and where we end up with $50 billion in debt and the entire economy trashed, and everybody still gets the virus.
Well, WA, the reason why they're probably leading in terms of or almost getting daily infections to zero is because they have basically de facto seceded from the rest of Australia with their complete border shut. And the people I've spoken to in Perth, they say that, because they have completely shut off the border, people are able to roam more freely around the streets of Perth, and that they haven't even closed the beaches that day. They've just said, because it is a warm Easter in Perth, they've just said you can go to the beach as long as you practice social distancing. So they went hard on the border closures, and they've even subdivided the state into 9 regions, but you're allowed to move around your region relatively freely. There's not police on every corner saying, what's your business out? So even if we just are confined to our states and are allowed to go out to the park or to the cafe without sirens behind us, I think that's a much better way of living, and we can keep the state and international borders closed for a bit longer.
Oh, exactly, and everybody should remain vigilant as to what's happening. What they try and sneak on you, what they try and pass by. We didn't have any extra news this week, but I think last week we talked about prisoner voting. The week before that it was abortion law, or it was 2 weeks before that. And so their agenda, the left-wing agenda, at least in New Zealand, marches on, and people should pay very close attention to that. But on the other hand, stay out of trouble. Never hurts to be more cautious and more aware of what's going on.
Yeah, stay at home as much as you can, not because the government said so, but just to keep yourself and others safe as well. obviously it's Easter Sunday coming up there. The Easter Bunny normally visits. Our leaders have said that the Easter Bunny's granted an exemption from travel restrictions because he's an essential worker and bunnies can't transmit the coronavirus. Jacinda made a comment on whether the Easter Bunny would be allowed to
Yes,
come.
she made comments about how the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny are essential services. So we about this time, I was going to say about this time last year, we had the media talking about Easter worshippers. If you remember the attacks against churches in Sri Lanka,
Yes.
which were bombed, hundreds dead and injured. There was a lot of talk about Easter worshippers. Well, it seems that now, a year later, we genuinely have become Easter worshippers, where the only religion that gets a free pass is the Easter Bunny, and the Easter egg hunts and whatever else. So, how's that for sort of a symbolic transition? Year on year, where that was really the focus. At least, that seemed to be a pressing issue. Is the Easter Bunny still coming? Can we chuck? Can you legally put Easter eggs in your backyard for your children to find? Like, that's what they were talking about on the past couple of days. Like, that's what they consider important. That's what they value.
We haven't had any commentary about the Tooth Fairy. I'm not sure if Tooth Fairy is classified as a human or a pixie, whether pixies are different
It's
species and whether they can contract the virus.
the real answer would be that they're not real, but that's not one that Jacinda can give because she
Of
treats
course,
everybody like children.
They're real.
And that's all. Basically, we are a nation of children being, patronized by the nanny Jacinda, who tells us that's fine, just sit at home and pretend like the Easter Bunny's real. And that's the end of the show. We can still get chocolate delivery, essential services, and that's still. The thing that I find the most bizarre week on week is just what is essential and what people consider to be essential, and then the way in which people comply with being deemed non-essential, and their usually essential activities being deemed as non-essential. Especially in the area of religious freedom, I suppose it makes sense that only in America is there really any pushback, because it's something that's embedded in their national psyche. But everywhere else, especially here in New Zealand, very little talk about, hey, what do we actually value? What's actually essential? People just doing what they're told and not complaining. I mean, I get you can't get away with staying out of trouble, but at least you could complain a little bit. And for most people, that's too hard.
I've noticed that the same thing with the nannying being treated like children, because basically when they're giving the updates, the Prime Minister and Chief Medical Officer is like, we've been very pleased that you've all been obeying the social distancing. Have a gold star. That's what basically. And then of course there was Scott Morris' infamous "Stop it" speech about stockpiling. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so there you go. We can end the show on that. We can take your gold star and pin it onto your chest, and job well done.
And I'll be back next Easter Monday with another episode of Wilmsfront, 7 p.m. Melbourne time on Tim Wilm's YouTube channel. And now that scheduling the episodes has worked, that's what we're doing now, rather than just putting out the link at the last minute. So that'll be convenient for both you and us as well. So have a good Easter. Stay safe from the virus and the authorities.
All right. Stay safe, comrades, and have a good night. We'll see you next week.